We have a major issue in Australia at the moment with a proposed waste dump and nuclear waste that needs to get stored somewhere. And we're being told that Australia needs a waste dump because of nuclear medicine. And as doctors and health professionals, we feel that this is not correct.
Radioactive waste management is an important issue, and I don't think anybody who's involved in this debate who has concerns about muckety would say that we shouldn't store our accumulated radioactive waste legacy anything other than appropriately and according to world's best practice. The real issue lies here is whether that is indeed what's happening here, because bad policy leads to bad outcomes. Firstly, what's being proposed at Muckety is only a disposal solution for low-level waste, which is hazardous for, say, 300 years. However, it's only going to store in effectively a fortified warehouse the more hazardous intermediate level waste, which requires many thousands of years of isolation from the biosphere. Without a disposal solution, that means that effectively you could have many decades, maybe 100 or 200 years or more of it just sitting in a warehouse without any disposal solution, and that breaches international best practice. Secondly, as a consequence of poor policy and bad proposed legislation, the government seems to have needed a battering ram to sell this to the public, and that is the requirement for nuclear medicine services. In other words, it's conflated the need for nuclear medicine services with a radioactive repository. Now that's a furphy. Firstly, most nuclear medicine waste is actually decays on site and is disposed of locally. Very little of it ever requires any storage. Some of it does require some storage for a period of time, but virtually none of it will end up at Muckety. There is some legacy waste that requires proper storage, but this is a tiny fraction of the waste that will end up at the proposed repository. Most of the waste there is Lucas Heights waste, the reactor waste, just outside of Sydney, and also contaminated soil from experiments in the 50s and 60s. That's what's ending up there. It's not about nuclear medicine. What the federal government is doing is it's using a furphy to sell something they couldn't sell otherwise. Clearly, if they put forward to the Australian public that accumulated legacy waste, and more importantly, most of the future waste over the next 40 years' life of the Lucas Heights reactor was due to the operation of the reactor, which produces some research, but also produces a lot of private industry services, then people would be less willing to lend their support. If you talk about nuclear medicine, you talk about cancer therapy, you pull the heartstrings of people, you will get people more on side. Furthermore, you actually drive a wedge between any legitimate opposition by misrepresenting the true need. The world's best practice encompasses what's known as a cradle-to-grave strategy. In other words, you don't build a nuclear reactor until you've got a final disposal plan for the waste, because otherwise you're just stuck with waste and you don't know what to do with it, as we are now. You know, the most hazardous waste has no disposal solution. That's the first principle. The second principle is that consultation has to be bottom-up. You've got to involve all stakeholders within a country. You've got to involve the local communities that will be potentially hosting a repository. You need to get their consent. You need to get other community groups that may have alternative positions. You need to involve anti-nuclear groups, because even though anti-nuclear groups might be opposed to nuclear reactors and so on, no anti-nuclear group is going to be opposed to responsible, appropriate radioactive waste management. And this is not pie-in-the-sky stuff. This is what's happened in Finland, and this is what's happened in Sweden. They only developed their radioactive waste repositories after the anti-nuclear groups were involved to determine what their concerns were. Because clearly, just saying no is not going to solve the problem. Most community groups, and particularly anti-nuclear groups, are quite responsible along these lines, hence why they actually have their concerns. Make no mistake, we need to dispose of our radioactive waste properly. That's not an issue here. The issue is to do it according to world's best practice and to not lie and mislead the public.
The Public Health Association of Australia and Medical Association for the Prevention of War, we spearheaded joint health position statement, which is being launched today, and it was first sort of incepted about a year ago. And we had some other pivotal health organisations join us, the Doctors for Environment Australia and the Aboriginal Medical Services Alliance of the NT, and the Australian Nursing Federation South Australia branch. And we were also supported by the AMA, the Australian Medical Association, who wrote a supporting letter. And in short, what we called for was an independent inquiry at a national level to look into two things. One is the issues with storage of the waste associated with nuclear medicine. And the second one was looking to how we actually source our nuclear medicine, and can we move away from nuclear reactors and still be able to generate our nuclear medicine. And we think, the organisations who have released this position statement, that we can.